This program is brought to you by UCKG.
Hello and welcome to the new season and another inspiring episode of A Different Kind of Woman. A Different Kind of Woman aims to be healthy. Diabetes is the fastest growing health threat of our times and an urgent public health issue. Since 1996, the number of people living with diabetes has more than doubled. If nothing changes, it is estimated that over 5 million people in the UK will have diabetes. On today's show, Coping with Diabetes, we are going to be discussing how to live with the condition and how to prevent ourselves from developing type 2 diabetes. Joining me to discuss the topic, medicinal food and cookery expert, Shahana Ali. Welcome, Shahana. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
And it's so great to have an expert, a medicinal expert in food and cookery. So tell us, what do you think is the reason why we have so many people in the UK that are suffering from diabetes?
There's a number of factors, actually. You have a lot of people eating more foods that contain hidden sugars, like high fructose corn syrup. And that's really going to contribute to their ability or susceptibility to get diabetes too. And the other thing is that they are looking at or having foods that are very grain-based, so breads and things like that, and refined sugars as well, and refined carbohydrates. And all of those, as well as the fact that they are leading more sedentary lifestyles, more desk-bound jobs and things like that, so less active lifestyles.
Everyone is so busy, so they're not making enough time to prepare their meals.
That's right.
As well as, money. A lot of people think to eat healthy, you have to spend a lot of money, it's more costly.
That's very true. However, that's really not the case. It's very much the fact that you can get affordable, healthy food. Frozen vegetables are just as good as fresh vegetables, and they are far less in terms of, the price is much lower, but the nutrients are just the same, or even sometimes higher because they're snap frozen as well. So that's great to have as a, fallback for a lot of people.
I think the problem too is that people don't know sometimes which foods they can get the most benefits from.
That's true.
Especially if you've been diagnosed. You have a certain habit of eating certain types of food. So it's like retraining your mindset, when you go to the supermarket to pick the right foods.
Yeah, exactly. It's the knowledge. Really, they need to be given the knowledge to have as a tool that they can use when they go out shopping.
Yes.
They know which foods to pick and which to completely discard.
Wow. It's a lot of work, but I think if you prepare yourself, you'll be making better decisions. You'll be making wiser choices that would help you long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it starts from young because we see sometimes even children having diabetes from a young age.
Yes.
Yes, it's incredible. But before we go further into the topic of today, let's get the facts and the chats with Priscilla and the people of London.
Around 700 people are diagnosed with diabetes every day. That's like one person every 2 minutes. Around 4.5 million people have diabetes in the UK, and the number is continuing to rise. Diabetic care is already costing the NHS £10 billion a year, nearly 10% of its entire budget. Diabetes is a collection of conditions involving the hormone insulin. The pancreas releases insulin to help you store and use the fat and sugar from the food you eat. There are two types of diabetes. Type 1 is when the pancreas doesn't produce insulin, which is very important to regulate the glucose levels in the blood. 10% of all diabetes are type 1, and type 1 is also the most common diabetes type in children. In type 2 diabetes, the body doesn't produce enough insulin, or the cells don't react to the insulin that the body produces, meaning the glucose stays in the blood instead of being used as fuel for energy. 90% of adults with diabetes have diabetes type 2, which can be developed later in life. 3 in 5 cases can be caused by lack of exercise, weight gain, or poor diet, which makes it entirely preventable. The symptoms include frequent urination, increased thirst, fatigue, unexplained weight loss, genital itching, slow healing wounds or cuts, and blurry vision. The goals to manage diabetes are to keep the sugar level in the blood balanced, together with a good diet, exercises, and medication. Medication includes insulin injections, but it all depends on the type of diabetes the person has and the sugar level in the blood. Researchers at Imperial College London have described diabetes as a defining issue for public health and have predicted that within a decade the UK will be the fattest nation in Europe. Together with the over 4 million patients suffering with the disease, a further 549,000 people are thought to suffer with type 2 diabetes without being aware of their condition. Almost 12 million people are at risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and if the trends continue, an estimate of 5 million people will have diabetes by 2025. Diabetes UK is calling the government to act by restricting some advertisements aimed for children and for manufacturers to cut salt, sugar, and fat in their products. Let's find out what the public thinks.
Why would you rather have a tasty treat and burn off the calories at the gym, or would you go without the treat?
Actually, no, I prefer healthy food, but most of the people usually choose unhealthy food because it's easier and it's more tasty.
I don't know, because we don't go to the gym, do we? So.
Well, I exercise at home, so I've got my own little gym, so why would I? Because it's probably more enjoyable.
I personally haven't got a sweet tooth, so I'd probably go without the treat and try and still go to the gym, though I'm not good at it.
Because I think life's short, and if I want to have a vanilla New York cheesecake, I'm going to do it. And then you can just burn it off if you're like worried about that.
It's often, you can sort of use it as like a reward as well. Or if you're going to have it beforehand, you know you're going to the gym later, so sort of it balances out being healthy and being unhealthy. I think it's good to have that balance because you've got to treat yourself if you're doing all this healthy stuff as well.
Why do you think so many people in the UK struggle with their weight?
I believe because, like you cannot really have a healthy life with this kind of weather. Like it's difficult run outside, so like it's easier get in the pub, have a beer and just eat rubbish rather than have a healthy life.
Because they're too easily led into fat tasty food or untasty food. Organic food is better for you anyway.
Education, haven't got the money to buy healthy foods, probably the main reasons.
It's often a lifestyle. If you're working 9 to 5,
Office job as well.
Office jobs in particular,
stuck at a seat all day, I guess they feel unhealthy. And in order to be productive, you have to have lots of coffee and sugar, and I don't know, it's not very productive, is it?
It's what you do in your free time as well, because if you're working 9 to 5, often you want to spend your free time relaxing, so you don't want to be running or going to the gym. You want to be spending it with your family, you want to be at home, just, you know, after a long day, you just want to be, like, I know if I've done like a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, I don't want to be going to the gym. That's the last thing I want to do after a long day. I want to be watching TV all evening because I'm tired. So
maybe it's if you find a balance.
That was very interesting there from Priscilla, speaking to our public, and the information shared was quite very interesting.
Yes, it was.
I can see that you were quite shocked with some of the responses there.
Yeah.
But it was good in a sense where she also gave us an idea of some of the symptoms that you may experience, and you're probably wondering, why am I always so thirsty, or going to the bathroom quite often, or the weight loss, you know, certain things unexplained. And the little tips that she shared with us was quite interesting. But what the public were telling us of why they eat healthy and the choices that they make was...
It's quite intriguing, wasn't it? So, yeah, absolutely. I think really what the key thing is that to take away from that is that a lot of people are not really armed with the knowledge.
Yeah, they're not aware.
No, exactly. About how best to prevent diabetes and also how to tackle it once.
So then what tips would you give to our viewers who are looking at this program right now? What tips would you give to them of preventing type 2 diabetes?
To prevent type 2 diabetes, I would absolutely say to try and lead a more active life. At least 30 minutes of exercise a day, even if it's gentle exercise, that's perfectly fine. But, you know, it has to raise your heartbeat a little bit. The other aspect is that to look out for hidden sugars in the foods that you eat. And there is so much. There is obviously sugars that are named by other names, like sucrose, for example, is another chemical which is similar to sugar. But however, you've got fructose, which is fruit sugar. You've got high fructose corn syrup as well, which is very, very...
what type of foods are they most likely we see them?
High fructose corn syrup is actually in a lot of foods that you wouldn't think it would be incorporated in. So things like soups, for example, can contain high fructose corn syrup, and that gives a reaction to the body where the actual glycemic response of the body to that high fructose corn syrup is more extreme than normal sugar. So really that means that your insulin spikes much more quickly and more extremely than normal sugar, or say brown sugars or whole sugars, things like that. And you have to look out for that, definitely.
Now, for the younger generation, the younger ones, to me, struggles even more sometimes, because after they finish school, sometimes it's the chicken shop or the sweets, they run to buy these things. What advice could we give to the younger ones as well?
Well, obviously they would lead a more active lifestyle than someone who is older or doing a desk-bound job. And I would absolutely recommend that the more sports they can do or the more activity they can do, the better. And also to have less white carbohydrates. So for example, white flour-based products like white bread or white flour items, and also fast food as well, fried foods. So really trying to avoid all of those. Look for whole grain foods. More really looking for oily fish, so healthy oily fish, and that's brilliant for keeping your blood sugar levels stable as well, because it stops the glycemic response from your body.
I do love my fish. I love a salmon. I eat broccoli, cauliflower. I eat a lot of vegetables, but there are moments where I do dip into the unhealthy section. But, you know, balance is key as well.
Yes, everything in moderation. And to really, really focus on trying to incorporate good fats in your diet, as well as a lot of vegetables, so a lot of colour in terms of vegetables. And really having a lot of vegetables will increase your fibre in your diet as well, which also slows the glycemic response of your body, which stops the insulin spiking. So I think those are all really good factors to try and take note of when you're looking at something to eat on a daily basis.
Very, very helpful. So we're going to take a short break, but stay tuned and take a look at what's next. Next, Dr. Abena Jones will join us in the studio.
Walking meetings are really fun. So you know you're going to sit in a boardroom, you're like, but why not get up, get out, go to the park and have your meeting, do you know what I mean? And have a walking meeting.
This program is brought to you by UCKG. This program is brought to you by UCKG.
Welcome back on today's show, Coping with Diabetes. We've been discussing healthy eating and the diabetes epidemic. Joining us in the studio is occupational medicine physician, entrepreneur, health tech advisor, and founder of Medic Footprints, Dr. Abena Jones. Welcome, Abena.
Thank you, Alistair. How are you today?
Good. Welcome to the show, and your first time on the show today.
It is my first time.
Yes, and your story is interesting. We have lots we can learn from each other.
Sure.
So how are diabetics affected by their conditions at work?
So I think it very much depends on the individual, the type of diabetes they have, how it's managed, and their job. So we see a wide spectrum of individuals with coping with diabetes, from those who are managed just with lifestyle changes, with those who have insulin pumps. And we we inquire about what kind of jobs they do. So if you're an office-based job, the risks are, you spend all day at the computer, you're not moving around that much, you forget to eat, and that's really dangerous, especially if you're taking one of the medications that lowers your blood sugar. Okay. Because that can cause what we call hypoglycemia, so low blood sugar. But then we talk about jobs whereby you're in a safety critical environment, such as driving a train or up an electricity pole. And if you're on insulin for those jobs, again, that can be extremely dangerous.
Yes.
So we really have to assess individuals on a case-by-case basis. And we also assess, what's their relationship like with their manager? How understanding are they? It can be really tricky, but it really depends on how diligent the individual is.
Yes. But how did your interests, how did you start in your company? What made you decide to go into this area?
Well, occupational medicine is not very well known as a medical specialty, but I became very interested in the wider world of work. So I come from a surgery and trauma background, and I was very interested in health and well-being. And we spend most of our time at work, and that is one of the key areas, how are we managing our health? It has a significant impact on our health as a whole, and that's where we manage our health most of the day. It's fascinating, really. And as someone who also suffers from health problems, I go through my own personal journeys, how am I managing myself? So whenever I look after anyone else, I'm thinking about, what am I doing for myself?
Yes, because I saw you spent 2 years in South Africa?
Yeah,
I've been reading up.
I had a lot of fun.
So that experience there really sort of triggered in you, to do something.
I took the leap and went to a country or continent I'd never worked in or never been to before, with a completely different public health system, very different needs. Diabetes there, it's especially in the rural areas. So in the cities like Cape Town, Johannesburg and Durban, if you have the money and you have the education, most people will be able to manage their diabetes very well. But usually in rural populations, there's a lot of poverty there, and most people don't actually rely on what we call conventional Western medicine. There's a lot of what we call bush medicine. And
I grew up in that era.
Oh wow!
Everything is there's a plant there. You can boil that bush, drink that. You have a cold, drink this. It wasn't like you can go in the pharmacy and buy a tablet. No, they truly believe.
So it's very difficult because we saw them at very late stages. So some of the kind of the complications associated with diabetes, we saw a lot of gangrenous feet. So they would come at a stage whereby their sugars are extremely high, their foot, they've got pus in their foot, or it's black, and they've travelled hours down the road. And because I was in a surgical specialty, and I said, well, you need an amputation to save your life. And they're like, well, let me think about it. I've got to go back to my family 4 hours up the road. And
thank God in the UK,
we're worried that you might die on that trip. so
But when you compare that to London and people living in the UK, we have so many benefits as well. We have so many opportunities where, we have the NHS, we can go to the hospital, we can get the necessary care that we need. But a lot of it is down to us.
Exactly.
The choices that we make as well.
Yeah. We have a lot of choices in this country.
We have free choice, but half of the times we have excuses as to why we can't eat healthy, why we can't do things, that we know we should be doing, like exercising. I know I should be, but it's one of those things we all can work on and improve on. So how much do you think employers discriminate against those with health conditions?
Discrimination occurs at work in a way where I don't think employers are aware on how to manage and approach any health problem that an employee has, because there still is this kind of air of taboo when it comes to how are you, what health problem do you have, because employers are worried that's going to affect my employment. Managers are I'm going to offend the individual. So that's where occupational health comes in. So we are like the intermediary. We support the employees, we support the employers, and help them to actually develop a plan or a strategy to ensure that they get to stay in work happily and healthily.
Yeah.
So that there is a huge risk of discrimination.
Because a lot of times, you know, people who have diabetes, they don't physically
There's no manifestation, is
yes,
there?
Exactly.
Yes.
It's a hidden disease. And actually a lot of us are walking around with hidden disease.
Yes, many people probably don't even know they have diabetes.
That's true, until it's a bit too late or they get really extreme symptoms.
Exactly. I mean, all of those symptoms there, they're very non-specific, right?
Yes.
So, you know, I've got some of those. So at the end of the day, I don't think I've got diabetes, I don't know. But, you know, so people don't necessarily go into the GP and say, I think I've got diabetes. That is very, very rare.
Yeah.
It's usually picked up on screening or secondary to another health problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we talk about discrimination, go back to your question, we think about what the Equality Act, which is any individual, so to have a disability, any individual that has a mental or physical health problem that has a substantial impact on their day-to-day ability to do normal tasks.
Yeah.
And that's quite a descriptive but quite broad sentence because you don't need to have a diagnosis. So some people with diabetes may not fit under that criteria, but others may. Yeah. And again, that's where we come in, because employers say, is this person under the Equality Act? Yeah. And we say, well, we assess them and then we give our opinion at the end of the day.
But then the next thing is like, there are cases where people have been freed from this illness. They no longer have diabetes.
Oh, so it's a case where it's manageable and the symptoms aren't really that extreme that you can actually go off the prescribed drugs. And I think it's quite rare.
It's very rare.
We do have cases, with people who are diagnosed to be type 2 and today they're no longer.
That's true. And it really is a case where that patient is quite strict in their managing of the diet and also their day-to-day activities, their liver activity and exercise. But I think it's quite rare to have a patient that conscientious, who's that compliant with what they need to do.
Yeah. As far as I'm aware, diabetes is not reversible, but you can manage it. Yeah. So, yes, as you were saying, there are people that do manage it very well. And, I mean, also, you may have read in the media about bariatric surgery and how that's been used and how some people don't have diabetes anymore. I don't think that's the case. It's just more about how they've managed their kind of glucose control better from those activities.
Yeah, I think really it's a case where it's still there, and you know they do have diabetes, but it's not to a level where it's to be having to be medically treated. They can actually manage it to a certain point, and I think that it can be done. And I do think a lot more people, if they are more conscientious about what
I'm really
do.
hoping that after seeing this show, people will think more of the choices that they make, the choices of food we put in our bodies, the choices of foods that we buy, and making time to exercise. Like I saw a picture of a desk that is really high up. So now they have like no chairs. So you have to like stand and work.
So things I advise is like standing desks, walking around the office, walking meetings are really fun. So you know you're going to sit in a boardroom, you're like, but why not get up? Get out, go to the park and have your meeting, do you know what I mean? And have a walking meeting.
Yes. I think, and it does affect your whole self-esteem, how you feel about yourself. You know, when you get active again, you get, doing things that you love, that you enjoy. And cooking. I'm enjoying cooking recently. I'm trying out different menus, different vegetables that I never used to eat before. And now I'm experimenting, and it's such a joy trying new things.
I really think it's important to make people more proactive and responsible for their health in that way. They do become more responsible the more they take control of their health. And these small things, they might be regarded as small things, but they play a big part.
Big part. Of course, it plays a big part in one's health.
And it has a sort of cascade effect, knock-on effect, where you want to do more once you start doing the little things.
And if you don't take care of it now, when you're young, when you get older, if you live to see.
But when you're young, I don't think you really appreciate the impact that chronic health can have on the quality of life because you're young. But as you said, there are little things in your day-to-day life that you can do to improve or prevent things like that happening. I mean, like, we talked about the gym. I hate the gym. I don't go to the gym. Like, I don't know who loves the gym here, but like, I hate the gym.
You have a friend.
But there are alternatives to the gym that you can really enjoy. Like, I go hiking, I cycle around London. Some people might want to do that, but you know, that's just an or you know, going up the stairs, the escalator, getting off the bus a few stops earlier, that kind of stuff. Very easy to do in your day-to-day. Don't to take time out to do that. It's just part of your daily routine.
I've heard of people actually looking at using their smartphones or their iPads while they're on the treadmill and taking a meeting there as well. Or even doing their work. Yeah, exactly.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Put away the chairs.
It might be an idea. Exactly.
Well, ladies, it was really, really interesting speaking with you and hearing your perspective on this subject matter. We're going to take a short break. Don't go away. Take a look at the interesting women that will be joining us after the break. Next, we'll be hearing from dietitian and gut health specialist, Dr. Megan Rossi, and Jen Greaves will be joining us in the studio with a life experience. So I'm thinking, so you seem like you have fun regardless of your diabetes. It doesn't keep you back at all. You're still able to do all the normal things that we usually would do.
Yeah, I would say so. It definitely gets you down. Sometimes you have a moments where it's very frustrating because if you ate the same thing one day as the next day, your blood sugars wouldn't be the same.
And what's really important about insulin is that it's effectively a transport. I like to think of it kind of like a taxi. So it takes glucose from our blood into our cells.
This program is brought to you by UCKG. This program is brought to you by UCKG.
Welcome back on today's show, Coping with Diabetes. We've been discussing how diabetes affects employment and healthy eating. Priscilla met with Dr. Megan Rossi to find out more diabetes and gut health.
I'm very excited to be here with Dr. Megan Rossi, a dietitian with a PhD in gut health. She received a Dean's Award for Outstanding Research and was listed as a successful story by Cosmopolitan magazine as top women in science. Welcome. Tell us a bit more of why gut health and what inspired you.
So gut health for me started out as being a dietitian, and I guess I decided to be a dietitian because it brings together my two favorite things, and that is good food and science. So that's why I became a dietitian. And then as I was, after graduating, I worked in a clinical hospital and I worked with a lot of really sick people, particularly those with kidney disease. Now, what I was finding, although their disease was in their kidney, a lot of them were coming to me with gut issues. And I started to get, sounds a little bit corny, but a gut feeling that perhaps there was a connection between our kidneys and our gut. So I decided to do a PhD in the area, and what I did in my PhD is looked at whether we could modify our gut health through diet and therefore reduce the risk or the progression of kidney disease. And it was a successful trial and did suggest there clearly is a link between our gut and our kidneys. And also during my PhD, I was very fortunate to work with Olympic athletes, and I found that even them, who are, at the pinnacle of health, also had gut issues. So I think, those two extremes of really quite sick people as well as really quite fit people, they both having gut issues, it really dawned on me that I think gut health is really quite central to our total health. So I think it was at that point I decided to, dedicate the rest of my career to gut health.
What are the different types of diabetes and what are they caused?
So diabetes is quite a serious condition, and what it really essentially means is there's too much glucose, which is a type of sugar, stuck inside the blood, and therefore our body can't use it efficiently. Now, I think it's easiest to explain it by thinking about what happens in a healthy person or someone without diabetes. So if we eat food that contains carbohydrate, we ingest it, it gets into our intestinal tract, and we break that down into glucose molecules. Those glucose then get into our blood system, and then from our blood, they get into our cells where they work and use as energy. So how the glucose gets from our blood to our cells is through this special kind of hormone called insulin. Now, insulin is produced by our organ called our pancreas. And what's really important about insulin is that it's effectively a transporter. I like to think of it kind of like a taxi. So it takes glucose from our blood into our cells. Now, if you have diabetes, there's something wrong with the insulin.
So for somebody who doesn't know if they do or do not have diabetes, how can they know? What are these symptoms?
Yeah. So the main symptoms are excess thirst, so you're really thirsty all the time. Other is needing to go and urinate quite frequently. Now, if you've got type 1 diabetes, it's also associated with a lot of weight loss, because remember, the insulin can't get that glucose into the cells, and therefore we don't get that source of energy. And in fact, we urinate out a lot of that glucose. So weight loss is associated with the type 1, as well as feeling really tired. Now, type 2 is a little bit different because it is associated with people who have excess weight. So if you are overweight or obese, I recommend, and you are quite thirsty all the time, urinating, even if you don't have those symptoms, but you are overweight or obese, I do suggest you go to your doctor and just get a simple blood test, and they'll be able to monitor that.
You mentioned something about low level on our energy. Do you think it could affect our mood?
Absolutely, yeah. So with diabetes, particularly type 1, if you're not getting that glucose that your body needs for energy and move around, then yeah, that is one of the symptoms, is definitely low energy levels.
Yes. We recently had a case of someone who had an operation to lower the diabetes. Can you explain us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so when we think about diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes, we think about what the risk factors are, and one major one is being overweight or obese. So there are some people who go to the extremes of actually getting surgery to help them reduce weight by shrinking their stomach essentially, and therefore have been able to drop quite a lot of weight, and that has actually reversed their diabetes. Of course, not everyone with diabetes needs to go get surgery. If you can look at some simple lifestyle modification strategies, such as making sure instead of, catching the tube everywhere, you walk everywhere and do a bit more physical activity that way. Other dietary suggestions, simple things, but like if you're having spaghetti bolognese, take out half of the mince and put in legumes or lentils to kind of reduce the amount of energy and the saturated fats and increase the fiber and things like that. So looking at your diet and trying to, through that as well as exercise, trying to get your weight under control, even a 5 or 10% weight loss has actually been associated with reversal of some people's diabetes, type 2 that is.
So you suggest a person trying to pursue a more healthy lifestyle?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know there are some people who go to the extreme and cut out all carbohydrates in their diet, but I think we need to remember where we get carbohydrates. So it's not just things like, your breads and cereals, but also things like fruit, which is really important for things like our gut health, as well as all the antioxidants in fruit, and even dairy contains carbohydrates, and we know how important that is for our bone health. So I definitely don't recommend cutting out carbohydrates. What I would suggest is changing the types of carbohydrates. So instead of having really refined, simple carbohydrates like cakes and biscuits, I'd say go to the really complex carbohydrates, which are things like really grainy breads and, black or brown rice and quinoa and those ancient grains that have got a lot of fiber in them, because with them, they actually don't cause that spike in your blood sugar. And that's because they take longer for those carbohydrates to break down into glucose and get into your blood. So it's a lot slower release, which is, great if you have a really slow insulin or that bus that's not very good at transporting it fast.
Thank you, Megan, to be here with us today. And it's back to you in studio.
Thank you, Priscilla and Dr. Megan. That was really interesting. Won't you agree, ladies?
Totally.
Yes, it was. So joining us in the studio to share her personal story is Jen Greaves. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And I know you have a personal story to tell us with your experience with diabetes. So when were you first diagnosed? with diabetes?
I was diagnosed when I was 8 years old. I've got type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition. So it can't be brought on by lifestyle factors. You kind of have no say in it. When I was diagnosed, I'd never even heard of the word diabetes. I didn't know what it was, but I was displaying those symptoms discussed just there. I was losing so much weight. I was going to the toilet all the time. I was really thirsty. So I was taken to the doctors and diagnosed, and it changed my life from that day.
Yes. So how did your parents explain it to you?
Well, to be honest, I think we were all kind of dealing with it together. You come out with that diagnosis and you have to.
So did they have diabetes as well?
No. It does, it can run in families, but no, they didn't have it. So you kind of just have to get in there and get going, because you need to take injections from day one. You need to take insulin from day one every time you eat, and sometimes not even when you're eating. So it completely changes your world. But like anything, you learn your body and you get used to it. And I went back to school, and I've done everything that all my friends have, and I haven't not done anything because of type 1 diabetes. You just have to plan a lot more, and I have to take insulin with every meal I eat, and everything I do affects my blood sugar levels, which is what you're trying to keep on an even keel. So it's a lot of planning and preparation and listening to your body, and it doesn't always go to plan, but for the most part it doesn't really stop you doing things.
So what sacrifices do you have to make daily?
I wouldn't say there's any sacrifices necessarily. It is more about planning. So I always have to have something on me in case my blood sugar goes low.
So you always have food in your bag?
Sugar, So sweets or juices, and
you can eat sweets.
Yes, that is a real common misconception of people with type 1, that they can't have any sugar. I can, and I would take the insulin accordingly. But just like anyone else, if I eat lots of bad foods, then I feel quite rubbish. So it's just being aware of what you're putting into your body and how that will affect your blood sugars. Carbohydrates affect my blood sugars just as much as sweets and fast-acting sugar like that. So I would have to dose just as much for bread as I would for chocolate.
Wow. So I'm thinking, so you seem like you have fun regardless of your diabetes. It doesn't keep you back at all. You're still able to do all the normal things that we usually would do.
Yeah, I would say so. It definitely gets you down. Sometimes you have a moments where it's very frustrating, because if you ate the same thing one day as the next day, your blood sugars wouldn't be the same. It reacts to kind of everything you do, stress, tiredness, the weather, everything affects your blood sugars when you have type 1 diabetes. So you do have to constantly, test your blood sugar and monitor and adjust and dose. So it's kind of constant in that way. But as long as you are kind of trying to work with your diabetes, you don't have to not live your life.
Okay. So I see you have created a blog to help others. How has that been going?
Good. I've been running my blog for 7 years now. I started it. I kind of got to a point, I had kind of a phase where I wasn't as engaged with my type 1 diabetes, which a lot of people experience. A lot of people with type 1 are younger, so you've got other priorities like going out and living your life and stuff. So I came to that realization that you discussed earlier, that I didn't want to have any long-term complications, so I wanted to take responsibility for my condition and learn more about it. So I started writing. I'm a writer anyway. I started writing to document that kind of learning process, and then other people responded. I focus more on my experiences with diabetes as opposed to kind of the medical side of things, because there's academia and textbooks and loads of things out there that are much better at it than I would be. So I kind of focus on it can be quite an embarrassing condition, if your blood sugar goes low in an awkward place, or you have to explain to someone why you're slurring, for example, if your blood sugar's low. So I tend
I was just going to ask you, what are some of the symptoms that you suffer when it's really low?
So hypoglycemia is low blood sugar, and that basically means you need to take in some sugar. So a lot of people say it's like being drunk. My brain just doesn't connect very well. My breathing gets quite shallow. I go very pale and shaky, and I struggle to get my sentences together. Whereas a high blood sugar, which means you need more insulin to bring your blood sugar levels down, I get very, very sluggish and slow and kind of moody and tired. But it's a much more kind of slow burn as well. It takes longer to reduce your blood sugar than to fix a low blood sugar.
I'm sure a lot of people could identify with some of these symptoms you just described.
But you know, you were talking earlier about the food you eat and how it affects your blood sugar levels. I kind of have that insight because I test my blood sugar and I dose myself with insulin. People who eat lots of carbohydrates or sugar, you know, get that spike, but then they do feel really slow and sluggish, and you know, it's a similar
So from your blog, do you get a lot of people saying how it has helped them? Because I know you open yourself to the world, sharing your experience, and which is good, because there are also other people that are suffering, but you know, experiencing, you know, living with diabetes day to day.
Yeah, it can be quite isolating. I've only met a handful of other type 1 diabetics, you know, in my life, and kind of to have other people out there who understand what you're going through, you know, through a blog, through social media, that's really helped the type 1 community. And also, you don't necessarily need to be an engaged like tweeter or anything like that. A lot of people take comfort from it, knowing that they're not alone, and they may not necessarily interact, but just to read someone else's experiences can be quite a comforting experience. And also, I'm not perfect, and I don't ever profess to be perfect. I don't always have perfect blood sugars. So I think that as well is a comfort, because there is a lot of pressure to make your blood sugars as good as they can be, but sometimes life doesn't work like that. So I think shared experience is always helpful for people.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story with us here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're going to take a short break, but don't go away, as we'll be back with more on coping with diabetes. Here's a sneak peek of what's coming up after the break. Next, we'll be inspired by those cycling in the Prudential Ride London Bike Rally to raise money for Diabetes UK, and we will take a test to see how at risk of type 2 diabetes we are. Are you physically active? Look at the faces there.
This program is brought to you by UCKG. This program is brought to you by UCKG.
Welcome back on this week's show, Coping with Diabetes. We've been discussing strategies to cope with diabetes. Our team went to see the inspiring men and women raising money for Diabetes UK at the Prudential Ride London. Take a look.
So today is a massive day for us. It's a huge day. We've got over 150 people cycling to raise money for Diabetes UK. So we are here, you can probably hear them, our cheering squad. We're here to give back to those people that have committed a huge amount of time to do fundraising and have really trained hard and for many hours over every week in the last few months that they're prepared for today. 100 miles is a really long way, so we just want to do everything we can to say a big thank you to all our cycling supporters.
What inspired me today to take part was many family members I've sadly lost due to complications of diabetes. Also a thing to get fit as well. Training was a bit haphazard. It's quite intense, up to 4 times a week. We had short periods of training, like an hour, and then some of them would be 2-3 hours at a time. And you put varying things like hills, inclines, make it as varied as possible, and endurance. Probably could have done a little better with speed, but the main objective was to get through today. Really great turnout, support, which really helps, really encouraging, kept me motivated to push through.
The number number of people being diagnosed with diabetes every year is increasing significantly in the UK. So the money that they raise today, we're hoping they're going to raise for us about £100,000, which will make a massive difference. We need to continue to put money into research. We need to continue putting money into our services and our products so that we can continue to support people, because ultimately, one day, fingers crossed, we really want to find a cure for both type 1 and type 2 diabetes.
That looked amazing. I am truly inspired by this fundraising effort, as I know it would help many individuals and families for Diabetes UK. So let's find out if we are at risk of type 2 diabetes. Please note, this tool may not be accurate for anyone undergoing treatment for diabetes. So ladies, we have some questions for you. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay, great. So how old are you? Less than 40 years, 0 points. 40 to 49 years, 1 point. 50 to 59 years, 2 points. Or 60 years or older, 3 points. I know some of us look younger than we really are. So you've taken a note of how many points you scored there?
Yeah.
Have you ever been diagnosed with gestational diabetes? Yes, 1 point. No, 0 points. You've taken note of that? Okay, next question. Do you have a mother, father, sister, or brother with diabetes? Yes, 1 point. Or no, 0 points. And I know earlier on you were telling me that you have family members with diabetes.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. So if you have siblings, yes, 1 point, or no, 0 points.
Okay.
Are you physically active? Yes, 0 points, or no, 1 point. Look at the faces there.
In some ways more than others, let's put it that way.
Yes. Have you ever been diagnosed with high blood pressure? Yes, 1 point, or no, 0 points. You've taken note of that?
Yeah.
Okay. What is your weight category? If you are healthy or below score 0, above score 1, 4 or over, you are at risk. How accurate do you believe the body mass index indicator is?
I think these days it's actually not as accurate as you would believe it to be. And I think it's because people are so individual in their makeup and also their situations, their lifestyles, and really their weight doesn't always tie in with the body mass index.
Yeah.
You'd have to look at their circumstances and what's led to their weight gain or their sort of mass indicator on that index.
Yes, because when I look at it from my height, I should be at this weight.
Yeah.
But I'm not there.
No,
so
absolutely.
So it does kind of trigger in your head, okay, I need to start losing weight or I need to start gaining weight.
Yeah, and you also have to look at the activity levels of the individual.
Of course.
Their eating as well.
Yes.
How healthy their lifestyle in general is as well. So looking at all of those factors, and if they have an illness, that's contributing to that weight gain or underweight situation, then they really need to look at that as an individual case-by-case basis.
Okay, well, what did you think?
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't take into account your makeup, as you said, so you can be very, very heavy, but very healthy and muscly, or you can be very slim and very unhealthy and just naturally you are slim. So yeah, I think it's maybe a good starter gauge, but you do, I would say you have to look a little bit closer.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts to share with our viewers on coping with diabetes?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that can be done. They don't have to cost an arm and a leg to have a good diet. You can actually have a great diet, healthy diet on a lower budget. And things that we mentioned before, such as frozen foods and in terms of vegetables.
Yeah, I thought it was a really great tip.
Yeah, it's really great because what happens is that a lot of the nutrients are actually preserved in the frozen vegetables compared to a lot of fresh vegetables. So it's snap frozen, that's what you're looking for. And they cost much less than fresh vegetables as well. And if you have a very much plant-centric diet, so more plant-based diet, when you have diabetes level 2 as well as level 1, diabetes 1, then that really, really helps to control your glycemic response or the insulin spikes.
Okay, and Albania, what are your final thoughts?
Obviously I'm coming from an occupational background, so I would say if you have diabetes, make sure that you have a strategy on how to manage it at work and communicate that with your manager if you can, because that's usually the area where people are a bit too busy or they don't have the time to manage it and things can go drastically wrong.
Yeah, it's so true. Communication.
Communication, responsibility.
Yes.
Strategy.
Planning.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Jen?
Speaking as a type 1 diabetic, I would say everyone's condition is very unique, so find what works for you, take advice that works for you and discard the rest, but also you don't have to do it all on your own. Like, you can ask for help, and you know it can get very serious very quickly, so you know, own your condition and try and kind of be empowered by it, as opposed to kind of being overwhelmed by it, and it is hard, but I think, you know, you are more than your diabetes for sure.
Yes, I agree. Help is definitely out there. You don't have to suffer in silence or on your own, because there's so much support out there available. So thank you, ladies, for coming to the studio today and sharing your stories with us.
Thank you.
It's been really, really helpful. More than a third of UK adult population live with a long-term condition, and it's estimated that as many as half of them live with more than one. So focus on what you can control, such as your diet, exercise, eating healthy. With constant ups and downs of life, we have to remain positive. We have to look after ourselves, our health, the best way we can. It's very important that we take care of ourselves, take care of our health. So you've heard our thoughts on today's program, which is coping with diabetes. So tell us your thoughts on how you are coping and what you have done to manage your diabetes. So you can write to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or by emailing comments@dkw.me. Join us next week for another exciting episode of DKW. Until then, it's goodbye.
This program is brought to you by UCKG.